£100 million was spent in England on failed efforts to block children's SEND support. I'm going to read into this exclusive from The Guardian, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an exclusive from The Guardian with the headline that £100 million has been spent in England on failed efforts to block children's SEND support. The exclusive reveals that councils win at just 1.2% of tribunals, as experts see signs provisions are becoming a battle with desperate families. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share this across social media so others are notified of this video. So what is SEND, Regan? So this is about those children who need that special extra support, special extra needs, that may have certain not clear disabilities, conditions and whatnot, where they need that extra support to help them. And the premise here is that councils, so there's a couple of reasons why I think councils were and the government at the time, the Conservative government at the time, were blocking a lot of this support. So the first and most understandable reason is cost. Obviously, I've said it again, time and time again, austerity, 14 years, councils run to the ground by the Conservatives, barely any money. So that's one of the first reasons why I believe some councils were desperate to stop that. But then you say, well, they spent 100 million in England on failed efforts to block them. So why would they do that? When it comes to my second reason, the second reason is obviously spots. Having the teachers and the system in place for it, when there's been a massive increase in SEND support, as we will read into in this. There's been a huge increase in the children needing those extra needs, and what skyrockets this? Well, when there are less services, when there are less support for children, more children are more inclined to end up going down this rabbit hole because the parents are not getting that additional support that they need in the basic school. It could also come down to if a child is not being put through, like for example, in a daycare, spending time with children. It could have a negative effect on them later on in their school year. They could develop SENDs during that time, which will then lead them to needing that extra additional support that the government that the government and councils are struggling to give. There are a number of factors to do this, but when you have the austerity that we've had, when you have less services, less support, less of public services basically that are there, well, yes, of course you can turn to the private industry if you have the money. If you have the money to send them, if you send these kids to private SEND support and whatnot to help your child, that's great if you've got the money. But for those who don't need the money, they turn to their government, they turn to the government and councils to help them in these situations. And in those situations, because over the last 14 years, services have gotten worse and worse and worse because of the austerity, it means that less kids have had the support and the help that they need, which then in turn increases the need and demand for more children needing that support. Because again, the education has not been as good as good as it has been in the last 14 years because, again, of austerity, the cuts. We're talking about the crumbling buildings, the infrastructure that schools have been going through. They have not had enough money pumped into them. Teachers have been left to fend for themselves, and many, many times by the government as well. So all these things have combined into what is put in many children in this situation. So all these things are all tied and linked in together, because if one area is not working, then it links you to other parts as well. And this is a serious problem. It's not just about the money. Yeah, okay, it's not just about the money. It's about having the places for the children. And if the places are not there, that's a major problem as well. And remember, this is specifically England, hence the name is 100% in England as well. So I can't speak for Scotland, I can't speak for Wales. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this issue doesn't happen in Scotland, because I'm 90% confident that the Scottish government would not stop kids getting the SEND support that they need. I'm 99.9% sure of that. But we know the Conservatives have very little care or regard for the people of the UK, because they've shown it time and time again. So, with all that said, let's have a bit more read into this. So, more than £100 million was spent last year by local authorities and the government on failed efforts to block support for children and young people with special education needs in England, according to analysis by The Guardian. Also, I want to point out, I am someone who needed special education needs when I was younger, based on what I went through. I got expelled from school. I had to go to a special needs school, and I was there, and it actually changed my life. Really made a massive difference to me. So, as somebody who had special education needs and needed that, yeah, it was a massive game changer for my life and the direction that I was heading. But a lot of kids now, if I was being grown up, if I was being raised right now, it would be much harder for my parents to have done it, even with the money, even if they had the money. Nowadays, it's even harder for kids. The enormous cost in legal fees and staff resources came after councils won just 136 out of more than 10,000 tribunals in 2022-2023. So they only won 136 cases. A success rate of 1.2%, as record number of families took to the courts to challenge councils over agreements known as Education, Health and Care Plans, the EHCPs. So experts said the surging number of appeals and mounting costs were evidence that special education provisions were becoming an adversarial battle between cash-strapped councils and desperate families, with the National Audit Office among those recommending that wholesale reform was needed. Yeah, as I said, the councils were struggling, and then and families who were desperately needing, because obviously, as parents, you will do absolutely anything for your children, and rightfully so. You need to go. That's what you need to do. Want to give your children the best possible education as you can. So, a spokesperson for the independent provider of special education advice, a charity providing free legal support and families, said it's hard to avoid the conclusion that local authorities must calculate at some level that the cost to them to contest tribunal appeals, even if they lose, than to provide every child and young person with what the law entitles them as a matter of course, because the majority of families don't or can't appeal. So Aru Saha, the chair of the local government association Children's and Young People Board, said, so councils fully recognise the right to families to take appeals to tribunal. However, the fact that a significant number of cases are being taken to tribunal hearings is symptomatic of a system that is failing for families and councils too, who want to provide the very best for every child, in spite of the rising need of support and financial pressures. Yeah, like I said, there's costs and there's placements for all this. These shows that reform of special education needs and disabilities SEND services is urgent and essential. The number of children applying for and being granted EHCPs has shot up in recent years as schools and council budgets have dwindled, leaving EHCPs as the only way for families to get extra funding and support for a child in their place of education. Yeah, so, many families are struggling as well. So that's another factor into it as well. So the Department of Education, the DfE, figures show that nearly 1 in 19 children aged between 5 and 15 in England now have an EHCP, which can name a school for the child to attend and detail the additional support that they need to be given, paid out by the local authority as high needs budget. In 2022-2023, the SEND Tribunal registered 13,658 appeals against the EHCP's decision, a 24% increase from the 11,052 the previous year. The latest data published this month shows that tribunal costs will continue to surge after 21,000 appeals were registered in 2023-2024, an annual increase of 55%, and only 17,000 were concluded, adding to the 9,000 case backlog seen earlier this year. Of the 13,658 tribunals registered in 2022-2023, only 7,829 were decided fully or partially in favour by the appealing families. Detailed analysis by Pro Bono Economics, updating data from Government Research Complied for the DfE and the Ministry of Justice, suggests that the cost to councils for each appeal average about £8,500. That's equivalent to £67 million. Tribunal fees charged to the MOJ and the DfE total close to £20 million. Of the remaining tribunals, 2,556 were conceded by councils, while 1,187 were withdrawn. But even those cases required staff time and costs amounting to about 19 million for a combined total of 105 million. The nearly 2,000 remaining appeals were added to the tribunal's backlog. The Council for Disabled Children, which represents more than 300 voluntary and community organisations, said to revive the pressure on the tribunals and provide the essential services that underpin healthy and happy childhoods, local authorities must be adequately resourced, including investment in workforce development. The government needs to commit to targeted investment to create the capacity to break these unhelpful cycles. The stabilisation of local government is a critical prerequisite for much needed reforms to the SEN system. And this all obviously leads to increases in more for people with those needs, and especially if they don't get those needs as they're growing up, these children, what they can lead to is ending up having severe mental health issues. And mental health is becoming, as we know, is a big hot topic at the moment in England, and it's going to be even exaggerated even more by the power of social media now. Whereas in my day there wasn't any social media, but now because it's a regular thing, so you have that on top of it, obviously, which here in England we don't have full control over it yet. So all these things are adding up are real challenges, for parents and teachers to raising children. Georgina Dower, a SEND specialist and the head of inclusion at the educational publisher Twinkle, said that we know public service has been decimated across the board, and this is a reflection in councils and not meeting the legal deadline for EHCPs. There are also concerns that the bar for EHCs needs assessments have been raised to reduce cost. It said the government needs to provide sustainable long-term funding for the councils, as well as writing off the £3.2 billion deficit in high-need spending that local authorities have accrued, which is forecast to reach £5 billion by 2026. That's a huge amount of deficit, £5 billion. A DfE spokesperson said, every child deserves the opportunity to achieve and thrive at school, but at the moment far too few are being given that chance. The far-reaching reform families are crying out for, and this government is driving, will take time, but with greater focus on mainstream provision and more early intervention. Kick-started with our significant investment into SEND at the budget, we will deliver the change that is so desperately needed. Last Friday, MPs on the Commons Education Select Committee announced an inquiry into SEND with a focus on finding solutions. The Labour MP Helen Hayes, who chairs the committee, said, what we are hoping to do is to focus on where reform is needed, what good practices could look like, and where we can learn lessons. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, this month announced a £740 million capital allocation for mainstream schools to adapt buildings and facilities in order to accept more SEND pupils. This is all really good stuff, and the reality is that if Labour are to, this is going to take time for Labour to fix things, and as they rightly said in there. It will take time, and I know people are crying out for that change right now. People are crying out for the fun, for crying out the change so that their children have the best education possible. Then I totally agree with that, and I generally hope that Labour will get more SEND pupils in, and then they're given the funding is not just the funding is obviously distributed equally and fairly amongst across England, but they're given that extra support they need to help them start out in life. We know families are struggling. We know parents are struggling. We know kids are struggling. We're seeing that, and we're seeing it out there, and it's a big challenge. And I'm sure everyone agrees with me that we all want children to have the best education, the best possible start in life. Sometimes we may disagree about how we get there, but it's really important that the schools, the local authorities have the finances that they need. They have the right people in the right places to be able to support children, and that opportunities for these kids should not be blocked unless there's absolutely legitimate reasons to do so. I generally believe every child should be given the best opportunity possible. But I do feel that some of them have not been given that opportunity simply based on the situation that councils have been left in by the last 14 years of the Conservatives. So what do you guys think? What do you guys make of the situation on SEND children? What do you make on the £100 million spent in England? What do you make of the situations around councils? Let me know your thoughts on this story and more down in the comments section below. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button. Be greatly appreciated. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further and financially support me and the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.